I am having a thought daughter summer.
I so am a thought daughter.
Couldn't help but wonder. I couldn't help but wonder. I couldn't help but wonder.
All I've been doing this summer is thinking.
We're getting into a little bit of a thought daughter summer.
I couldn't help but wonder.
What is a thought daughter?
Oh, hello! Nice to see you again. I hope you're sitting comfortably because I recently found out about the thought daughter trend and I have a lot to say about it. To clarify, I don't mean the thought daughter meme as in THOT. I actually don't care what women choose to do with their bodies. I love them for their minds, which is why I'm more interested in the thought daughter phenomenon, a new TikTok trend referring to women who have a tendency to overthink everything and get emotionally attached to people and places and situations. I've been seeing thought daughter memes and videos show up on my various feeds for a few months now. And the interesting thing about it is that although it's a pretty popular trend, there isn't one unified definition of what a thought daughter actually is. Some people think it's just another reading aesthetic for women who are trying to make themselves look smart and sophisticated online. Some think it's a branch of the Femcel / dark femininity / female manipulator subculture, while other more optimistic people think it's somehow related to a form of mental health activism. We will figure it out together by the end of this video, I promise. Before I get into it though, I have to tell you about today's sponsor, Love and Pies. Love and Pies is a mobile game that I would describe as surprisingly relaxing, actually. A little bit of escapism from everything. It's incredibly easy to pick up. I, for one, had not played a mobile game in quite some time, but as soon as I started, I immediately got like that cozy, familiar vibe from it. Basically, the point of the game is to make pies or other baked goods and then to serve them to your customers. And then with the money that you make, you get to do little upgrades and redecorate. If you're one of those people who periodically thinks about moving to a small town, opening a bakery and starting over, but you can't actually do that because it's a huge life decision and you can't just pick up and go, then Love and Pies is pretty much the perfect way to live out that fantasy. If you download Love and Pies at the link in my description and play up to day 3, you will receive an amazing free gift of 200 energy and 50 gems in their in-game inbox. And if that doesn't sound like very much right now, just start playing the game and then you'll see how important those things are. So download the game for free at the link in description and get your super sweet surprise. Thought daughter. Let's start from the beginning. The thought daughter trend originated in response to the gay son or thought daughter video format, which became really popular over on TikTok several months ago. Basically, it became a really popular thing for those straight interviewers with the really tiny mics to walk up to people and ask them if they would rather have a gay son or a thought daughter. They claimed that the purpose of the question was to highlight prejudice, but yeah, it was just rage bait. And some people did indeed take the bait, while others decided to take the piss.
We got what you looking for! What you looking for? We got what you looking for!
And somewhere between taking the bait and taking the piss, the thought daughter was born. Content creators began to play on the phonetic similarity between thought and thought, creating a new character type, the thought daughter. This persona diverges entirely from the original misogynistic meaning and instead embraces a more introspective and intellectual identity. Videos began surfacing where TikTokers humorously depicted their parents being confused by the original question and instead asking for a thought daughter. These videos typically feature niche intellectual and artistic interests such as listening to Mitski or Phoebe Bridgers, reading Normal People by Sally Rooney, or engaging in deep philosophical musings. This reimagining of the term transformed it into a celebration of overthinking and thoughtfulness, creating a space for self-expression and intellectual exploration. And I've seen a lot of people on TikTok give similar explanations. To many young women online, it seems to have become symbolic of a rebellion against the objectification of women. TikTok user Ali.Shelf also adds that the thought daughter identity revolves around books, films, and music that the people in this community community feel that they can connect with on a deeper level. And there is a specific reason that she gives for this. Basically, in her opinion, a feeling of being misunderstood and anxious and isolated is characteristic of the thought daughter persona, and having common interests to bond over helps these people push past that feeling. One of the first things that I noticed about thought daughter content is that a lot of it revolves around mental health and this theme of being misunderstood and isolated. In fact, it seems almost like the thing that pushed the thought daughter trend from a more niche reading aesthetic to a more mainstream sort of viral TikTok phenomenon was the shared experience of this struggle with anxiety and overthinking, which is fundamentally a good thing, right? One of the great things about social media is that it can give people access to content that makes them feel seen and less isolated. But I have seen some people take this one mental health aspect of the thought daughter trend and use it to try and characterize the entire trend as a sort of mental health awareness movement, which is taking it a little bit too far in my opinion. In an article for neonmusic.co.uk, writer Tara Price describes the thought daughter trend as a rallying cry for women navigating mental health challenges like anxiety and depression and grappling with the complexities of modern womanhood. And I can definitely see that to some extent. TikTok hashtags have been known to sometimes become these huge conversation starters where thousands of people jump on the trend and share their struggles with common human experiences, which can be very comforting to watch if that's something that you also have struggled with. If you watch my channel for a while, you will know that I've talked about this with the former gifted child syndrome. And more recently, I read an article in The Atlantic about the eldest daughter hashtag, where women on TikTok were using the hashtag elder daughter to talk about the societal expectations that come with being the eldest daughter in a family. Talking about how they were expected to be nurturing and sensible and oftentimes to take on responsibility for younger siblings when they themselves were still children. I can understand why it's therapeutic to watch this type of content, and this is part of the appeal of the thought daughter trend. A lot of people on TikTok are saying that it's comforting to see other women struggling with anxiety and depression, and I've seen also some people actually give tips on how to handle those things. Sitting with your thoughts and journaling, for example, seem to be a cornerstone of thought daughter culture. However, if you consume as much thought daughter content as I have over the past week, you will realize pretty quickly that the thought daughter is not somebody who seeks to resolve her issues. The better part of thought daughter content often romanticizes overthinking. Her diaries are not the tidy to-do list and gratitude journals of the that girl aesthetic. They are messy and rambling and bordering on chaotic. They do share one characteristic with the productivity journals of the more girl boss inspired clean girl type. Both these journals are meant to be photographed and shared. They tell a story, and that story is I, the poster, am someone who is overcome with emotion and nostalgia, and I overthink and I get sad, but I'm not looking to change that about myself. Sadness and nostalgia is part of the thought daughter aesthetic, and therefore part of the identity. So I don't think that the thought daughter individual is somebody who is looking to get rid of their sadness. I think the trend attracts people who are still in the wallowing stages. And I don't mean wallowing in a negative way, nor am I saying that these people are pretending. I mean wallowing as in still coming to terms that this might be something that they struggle with or are fascinated by, and maybe even indulging in it a little bit in the sort of slightly painful way of picking at a scab. And we can see this in the books and films and music that the thought daughter content revolves around. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of people have been quick to categorize the thought daughter trend as a type of reading aesthetic. The very origin of the trend was to exist in opposition to the THOT thought daughter. And if that girl was a superficial boy crazy girl who will hook up with just anybody, the thought daughter was basically saying there is more to women than just their sexuality. I mean, look at us. We read and think about things. And to prove that, the Thought Daughter came up with a whole syllabus of required reading, viewing, and listening, which it then proceeded to disseminate across social media. Also worth mentioning that the Thought Daughter aesthetic, like all social media aesthetics, also includes the odd consumer product because, you must be a customer at all times, I guess. But the majority of Thought Daughter content is related to books, as seen in dozens of TikToks recommending Thought Daughter books, as well as YouTube videos from people talking about their Thought Daughter summer reads. One of the creators who made a video about Thought Daughter book recommendation even calls it an aesthetic. She keeps calling it the Thoughtful Daughter aesthetic, but it's pretty clear from the TikToks that she references in her video and from the comment section that she actually means Thought Daughter. She just misspoke. The interesting thing about these book recommendations is that if you are the least bit familiar with the online book community, you will have seen all of them 1,000 times by now. Lolita, The Virgin Suicides, My Year of Rest and Relaxation, The Secret History, pretty much anything by Joan Didion, Patti Smith, and Sally Rooney, interspersed with the odd 19th century Russian classics. They're basically the hot girl, cool girl, sad girl books that everybody was talking about on social media last summer and the summer before and the summer before that. And I realized that the way I said that sounds a little bit dismissive. I don't mean to be. In fact, quite the contrary. I came across a post in a subreddit for a podcast called Nymphet Alumni, which said, I think it's interesting how it's become a trend for women in their 20s to be readers, writers, pseudo-intellectuals, if you will. And it pissed me off a bit for like a second, because what do you mean pseudo-intellectuals? Why pseudo? I still fail to understand why women's interest in culture is always met with such suspicion. It's like as soon as a woman says she likes a book or just reading in general, she's under investigation. And again, I'm not saying that there aren't people who are being super performative about it. Like, we all know that you can be a reader and a writer and just shut up about it as well. But making content about your hobby doesn't automatically mean that you're only engaging in the hobby for the content. Unless you're like a content creator that gets paid to be a content creator, and even then it's a little bit more complicated than that. And the irony is that I looked up this podcast and found this nylon feature about them, which defines them as a podcast where fashion and culture are approached with an unapologetically feminine intellectual rigor. So I'm assuming that if you're listening to this podcast and are enough of a fan to be in their subreddit, then you at least believe that the 3 women involved in this podcast are capable of intellectual rigor. So how are we still so skeptical about women reading and writing? Why is it that when it comes to women that we don't know or don't particularly like or have a parasocial relationship with, they're doing it for the aesthetic? I understand that some people are annoying, but they can be annoying and intelligent. Tangent over. Back to my original point. As I was looking through the list of cultural references that make up the Thought Daughter syllabus, if you will, I did notice a lot of the same stuff that was going around and has been going around for years on Tumblr and then Instagram and more recently on Tumblr again and on TikTok. Books and movies with complex and often unlikable female characters captured at a moment of crisis in their lives, and music that conjures up an atmosphere of nostalgia and longing for something that cannot be regained. Another thing I found when I was looking around were Thought Daughter YouTube playlists of video essays and podcasts about society and culture and online trends like the Thought Daughter itself. And this is when I started noticing some overlaps between the Thought Daughter trend and the Femcel aesthetic. I came across some Thought Daughter YouTube playlists, and one of them had just a collection of video essays like the one that you're watching right now, so sort of commentary about society and culture and online trends. But then the second one I saw caught my attention because it was more of a mix of various things. There are a few aesthetic videos on there featuring cinematic footage and voiceover narration about nostalgia and overthinking, interspersed with videos of book recommendations, which rarely fail to point out the hotness of the reader, of course. But then the playlist is pretty rapidly overtaken by inspirational, motivational content, and some videos like Turn Jealousy into Inspiration and How to Be Really Strong in Yourself seem pretty innocuous, if not even insightful and possibly helpful for people who struggle with those things. The playlist also includes advice videos on how to become more unfeeling, how to detach from people and situations. I watched a couple of them and they reminded me a little bit of the sort of dark femininity, the Wizard Liz type of content, where the solution is often just cut ties with everybody in your life to protect your peace, whatever that is. And this is where I started to feel like maybe we were stepping into Femcel territory. This one video, which I can only describe as eating disorder / thinspo content, definitely falls into the looks maxing category of Femcel content. I feel like it's important to note here that when I say Femcel, I don't mean the OG community of women who felt like they struggled to find a desirable romantic partner because they weren't attractive enough or they felt like they weren't attractive enough. I'm referring specifically to the Femcel aesthetic, which has been oddly popular online for a few years now. The line between the two can be very thin at times, but it's an important distinction to make. Originally, the term Femcel was used to describe an online community of women in a now disbanded Reddit forum who considered themselves unable to have sexual or romantic relationships due to unattainable beauty standards and misogyny. In her video, Toxic Femininity, What's Up with Girl Bloggers, Female Manipulators, and Femcels, Mina Lip points out that over the past couple of years, there has been a growing online subculture of women who use the term femcel to describe an aesthetic. Mina takes an article published in ID in the summer of 2022 as her point of departure in her discussion of the so-called femcel core. The article is no longer up because ID is no longer up as a website, so I can't quote exactly from it, but the intro to the article goes something along the lines of, if you like listening to a series of artists, including Lana Del Rey, Fiona Apple, Mitski, Hole, Melanie Martinez, and so on and so forth, if you're a fan of Gone Girl with an emphasis on Amy's cool girl speech, if you have a particular fascination with that one Jacques-Louis David painting on the cover of Otessa Moshfegh's My Year of Rest and Relaxation, if you feel particularly drawn to young female characters like the Lisbon Sisters in The Virgin Suicides or Vladimir Nabokov's Lolita, or you have an interest in Catholic iconography, then you're probably a femcel. Mina goes on to talk about how the article got a lot of criticism at the time because, as already mentioned, the term femcel stands for something that exists outside of the internet and in fact has nothing to do with online aesthetics. And at the time it was felt like the term femcel described something slightly more serious than a bunch of teenage girls making collages out of their favorite media and sharing pictures of Britney Spears wearing a t-shirt that said dump him. On Twitter, femcel is an easy synonym for depressed or not dating right now. On Instagram, it's a sort of funny word to pair with a baffling meme or a picture in which you actually look really hot and disaffected. It's newly popular on TikTok, which has seen an odd trend towards semi-ironic sex negativity. Tumblr users are adding #femcel to images of antisocial icons like the super skinny and delusional Natalie Portman in Black Swan, the Lisbon Sisters of The Virgin Suicides, and of course Lana Del Rey, from whom they learned the joys of cigarettes and cherry schnapps. So to reiterate, real femcels truly believe themselves to be unattractive or unlovable and even a sort of burden to the people that they are attracted to. Whereas social media femcels use this term ironically to communicate that they are willfully difficult to be in a relationship with. In fact, many self-appointed social media femcels have no trouble attracting the partner that they want, and a lot of them are actually in happy relationships. So femcel core doesn't relate to a failure to have a meaningful relationship because of external factors like physical appearance, but rather it refers to an attitude towards dating and towards womanhood mixed in with mental health issues and being a girl online. There are a few points of contact between the thought daughter and the femcel core trends, from their music preferences to the emphasis on overthinking about one's place in the world and the societal expectations on women. I've also noticed a tendency in the thought daughter trend for people to describe themselves as hyper independent or a loner or somebody who is predisposed to heartbreak and who often feels misunderstood, which ends up having negative impacts on their ability to have a good romantic relationship. So the prevailing attitude I've seen in thought daughter content is to just give up relationships altogether and sort of yearn in silence, I guess. Except, of course, they are screaming about it into the online void, so it's not really in silence, is it? That being said, I would say there is an important distinction between the thought daughter and the femcel, dark femininity, girl blogger, manipulator, whatever, and that is irony. Whether it's a young woman claiming the femcel identity as a satirical social media trend, or another tweeting their genuine feelings of frustration into the digital void, there is an undeniable performance of identity among femcels. Edgy, crude, and usually chronically online, the femcel is unashamed of their own toxicity and has cultivated a powerful persona surrounding it. So everything the femcel does online is steeped in irony, and every picture, every meme, every caption that she posts is an additional touch to her magnum opus, which is her social media feed. Whereas the thought daughter, and maybe I'm being optimistic here, strikes me as somebody who is a little bit more earnest and maybe even hopeful. This is not to say that the thought daughter is beyond criticism. There is actually plenty to critique, from the subtle return to diet culture and the random eating disorder references, to the way in which it still very much romanticizes mental illness sometimes, despite some people's best efforts to make it into a feminist mental health movement. And there is also a slight pick-me / not like other girls quality to the trend. If we wanted to be polemical, we could ask, for example, what does the thought daughter mean when she says that she thinks and feels more than the average person? What is the normal amount of thoughts and feelings that a person should have, and how do you know you have more than everybody else? Famously, none of us will ever be able to experience another person's inner life, so how do you know we're not all freaking out just as much as you are on the inside? And a few people on TikTok have already started asking these questions. Oh, you're a thought daughter? As opposed to what? Thoughtless daughter, brainless daughter, empty vacant daughter. We're all feeling complex individuals. We're all human, not a category. And your thoughts are not more important than another woman's thoughts because the soundtrack is more obscure or the book older. We don't always have to be something, and perhaps we need to think more about that. Just give it a thought, daughter. That being said, I don't really want to harp on this for too long because I feel like the term pick me has been thrown around so much that at this point it doesn't really mean anything anymore. People just use it to describe women that they don't like. Tara Mooney recently made a video about the way that pick me discourse has turned in on itself to the point where any woman making any statement about herself can be labeled a pick me, which is exactly what we've seen with the reading aesthetic, or pretty much any hobby or interest that women have and talk about publicly. At this point, you could say that you like flowers, and somebody who doesn't like you or is triggered by you for some reason will say that you're a pick-me. I do acknowledge that there is a performative aspect to the reading community and even to the thought daughter trend, as there is one to pretty much everything on social media. But I don't think it's performative in the sense that boring or unintelligent women are using aesthetics to make themselves look smarter or more interesting than they actually are. I think that these women are already intelligent and well-read, and they are trying to signal that to other people. And that is actually the real sad thing about all this. It's a little bit depressing to me that women feel the need to perform intelligence online or anywhere in life. It's sad that historically the default idea of what a woman is somebody who is superficial or not intellectually stimulating or uneducated. It's a little bit strange to me to see that saying I'm a thought daughter or I'm a reader and a thinker makes women feel special and out of the ordinary, because all the women that I know are thinkers and readers. But I also want to make allowances for people who make this type of content, because I'm aware that the reason why I feel this way is because I'm slightly older than the people who make this type of content. And also I found my people, right? I'm surrounded by a bunch of female friends and we're all on the same page, basically. And there are a lot of women out there who haven't been as lucky as I have in that respect. Another thing I've been thinking about, and I don't remember exactly where I saw this, but somebody was saying something along the lines of, well, Thought Daughter is just Femcel, and Femcel is just 2014 Tumblr sad girl. And the thing is that they're right. It is all the same thing, but for different generations. For someone who has been on the internet since 2007, this might all seem said and done because we've already been there, and now we're just watching younger people go through it as well. And of course, the slang changes, and we're on a different social media app, and there are a few new elements here and there, but to quote Lord's Instagram bio, the themes are always the same.